Hi, Ozzy here. In this video, I want to address a claim one often hears in discussions about same-sex marriage. It's the claim, frequently made by opponents of same-sex marriage, that their stance, that people may marry only people of the opposite sex, can't possibly be discriminatory because such a policy or rule is not itself discriminatory. Everyone, so the argument goes, is subject to the same rules or the same policy when it comes to marriage. Namely, everyone is free to marry someone of the opposite sex. Everyone, provided they're all adults or consenting, etc. And since everyone, gay or straight, is subject to the same rule, not to different rules or different rules applied to different classes of people, there can't possibly be any discrimination or injustice in such a policy. As they see it, it's not comparable to a discriminatory policy that says white people can drink from this water fountain, but non-whites must drink from that water fountain over there. No one, they argue, is being singled out, picked out. No one's being discriminated against or even mentioned. Hence, there's no double standard. The rule stating that people may marry only people of the opposite sex is just one equally applicable rule. There's only one standard, one policy, the same standard applied to all, and hence no discrimination, and hence no injustice. But of course, that beggars a very important question. What should be the rule or policy? To appreciate the relevance of this question, and is to see how it pertains to double standards and what makes for unjust social policies. Consider that this argument against same-sex marriage is actually, well, it's exactly the same type of argument that was sometimes invoked to prohibit interracial marriage in our not-too-distant history. Everyone's free to marry anyone they wish of the same race. That used to be the rule. How very equitable. Everyone's playing by the same rules, right? How could that not be fair? That was the argument. The problem, of course, is that it's not merely a question of everyone playing by the same rules, but wanting the relevant rule to be in place. What rule was that? Would that be? Well, consenting adults want to be free to marry whomever they please from the pool of consenting adults they're actually attracted to, and not have that pool be restricted based on race or ethnicity, social class, reproductive capability, or gender. People want to marry the people they love, who love them back. They don't want the pool of potential marital partners to be composed solely of people they aren't attracted to. Now, the old racist rule that said everyone may marry anyone within their own race was perfectly fair in the non-relevant sense. That is, it was a rule that could be applied equally to all, and was. But that didn't make it a fair rule. There are people who find people of other races and ethnicities more attractive than others, for instance. In some cases, a person's romantic and sexual preferences may be such that they may have no interest in people outside of a certain ethnic or racial group. To give you an example, when I was in university, I once had a friend, a straight friend, who was interested in Asian women only. He didn't find all Asian women attractive, of course, but he found Asian women so much more attractive in general that non-Asian women were simply of no interest to him sexually or romantically. He only was interested in and pursued Asian women. A rule applied to everyone which said everyone must marry within his or her own race exclusively would have been highly unfair to him, especially given that such a rule isn't motivated by the protection of a vulnerable group, such as we have with children, for instance, who, incidentally, by virtue of their comparatively limited experience and emotional and psychological limitations, are highly vulnerable to manipulation and exploitation by adults who possess greater strength, greater power, more knowledge, and more life experience. And while we're on the subject of children, or people who have significant cognitive impairments for that matter, we have another very good principal reason for prohibiting such marriages with them. Marriages are institutionalized contractual arrangements, and contracts require that the agents involved be non-minors. The children, you see, lack the cognitive and emotional maturity and life experience to enter into such serious contracts. And consent is relevant because a contract is only binding upon the agents who enter into it if they do so free of any manipulation, coercion, deception, or fraud. But we don't have comparable good arguments based on the protection of individuals or certain classes of people who are getting married when we're arguing against same-sex marriage. So analogies with marrying children, they're just not on. Returning to my college buddy, though. The fact that there aren't a lot of people like my college buddy with his uncommon psychosexual preferences for Asian women, and that this fact about his psychosexual makeup isn't visible to everyone just by looking at him, and that's not explicitly mentioned in a hypothetical rule prohibiting interracial marriage, doesn't mean that such a rule against interracial marriage would be fair or any less of an infringement upon his liberty. What would be the purpose of such a rule except to prohibit him from marrying a consenting adult he can actually be attracted to, and to restrict him to a pool of women, however large, he finds himself unable to find sexually or romantically interesting? This argument that there's no injustice if there's no double standard is exactly what was argued in the case of anti-miscegenation laws, which made interracial marriage impermissible. You must marry only within your race. That was the rule. That wasn't a double standard either, because there was only one standard applied to everyone. But it was a stupid, pernicious, and arbitrary standard, and had the predictable effect of promoting invidious comparisons between people, reifying irrelevant differences, and most importantly, interfered with people's freedom to enter into the sorts of contracts and fulfilling emotional relationships they want to enter into with other consenting adults. This application of the wrong, irrelevant, and intrusive rule to all made it a paradigm case of discrimination, even though it didn't pick out or reference any particular group and was applied to all. And of course, it was all motivated by bigotry. People found the idea of romance and sex across racial classifications to be icky. They thought it was unusual and distasteful, and this was proof to them that such relationships were unnatural and immoral. So you don't need two sets of rules to discriminate or to be unjust. You don't need a double standard at all. One can interfere with and restrict people's freedoms and be discriminatory and unjust merely by applying the same uniform but irrelevant, unwarranted, and meddlesome rule across the board. The fact that some people aren't being interfered with doesn't make the rule fair and equitable. You must marry within your own race was discriminatory, intrusive, and infringement of people's freedom to negotiate their own romantic relationships. Anyone who thinks you need two sets of rules to discriminate and unjustly interfere with people's lives has simply not thought this through. So it doesn't matter what class or group you belong to, or whether your group is visibly identifiable or not. When it comes to marriage, consenting adults just want to be free to marry the consenting adults who love them back, without someone limiting the pool of romantic partners on the basis of irrelevant criteria such as same race only, within your class only, or people of the opposite sex only. The issue here is not the existence of a double standard. The important issue here is that of choosing the relevant and morally defensible rule that should be applied to the question of who people should be free to marry, so as not to interfere in their most personal and intimate relationships, and so as not to prevent them from enjoying the same benefits that most of us just take for granted. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks for listening, and I hope this helps.